So today I'm going to talk to you about fictional stories. My research is in psychological science, but my background is in theatre. So I'm interested in the ways that we process fictional stories and why we as a species seem to be so drawn to them. Because of course before the interval we were able to engage with everything that the free radicals were doing on a sort of emotional level. We were able to laugh along at the frankly ridiculous things that were happening, but while maintaining enough of a mental distance to be able to understand how the joke worked. And similarly, you might cry when E.T. goes home, or you might get squeamish when Titus Andronicus lops off his hand, or you might be aroused by Christian Grey. I don't know judgment. and those reactions, they're real. You know, they're not fictional. They're real, and they're happening at the neural level in our brains. And the neuroscience has shown that when we just read about an action, our brains show activity as if we were performing that action ourselves. And when we read about a character in physical pain, our brains show activity as if we were suffering that pain. So fiction and reality actually aren't as distinct as we might sometimes tend to think. And yet, when we're experiencing the events of a fictional narrative, we still know that those events are fictional, that they're constructed. So the human ability to create and share and interpret stories is actually pretty sophisticated. And of course, fiction is big business. The time our species has spent engaging with the Harry Potter franchise alone is estimated at more than 235,000 years, and that's pretty conservative. So considering the time and money that we spend on fiction, it should offer us some kind of return. Otherwise, through a process of cultural evolution, it surely would have ceased to exist. Our human ancestors developed the ability to cooperate with thousands and even millions of complete strangers by sharing in collective stories in religion and law and ideology. And for all its faults, the world is a less violent place today than it's ever been in our history. And lots of people think that that's partly because of our ability to share in stories. So for example, the humanitarian reforms of the 18th century, such as improvements in workers' conditions, healthcare, women's rights, the abolition of the slave trade, and less cruel methods of capital punishment, coincided with the development of the mechanical printing press. And the proliferation of literacy and the spread of leisurely reading that followed enabled people for the first time to experience the lives of distant others by putting themselves in the shoes of the characters that they read about. So suddenly taking the family out to see a good hanging or a few people being broken on the wheel, it kind of doesn't seem quite so appealing as our brain neurons start firing more readily and we become able to imagine things from other people's points of view. So rather than simply providing a means to escape from our social interactions and commitments, reading fiction might actually support our understanding of them and our ability to respond appropriately. And that's because fiction is inherently social. It centres on humans or human-like agents, be it animals or robots or aliens, and their interactions with other humans and human-like agents. And we simulate those social interactions using our imaginations. And those simulations are visible in our brains at the neural level. So from the comfort of our armchair or park bench or the 7:19 Reading to Paddington service, we can develop the cognitive mechanisms associated with navigating the social world. So are fiction readers actually better at these kinds of social skills? Well, yes. Generally, the scientific research seems to show that people that have read a lot tend to be better at mental state attribution tests, which is a test of the ability to understand what other people are thinking and feeling without them actually needing to tell us. And they also tend to show more sympathy, more warmth and concern for other people, and tend to be better at taking the perspectives of other people, taking other people's points of view. And experimental research has shown that reading a passage of fiction compared to reading a passage of non-fiction seems to lead to the ability to attribute mental states through reading facial expressions accurately, and leads to more altruistic, helpful behaviours as well. But the thing is, of course, people don't just read fiction. The science is focused on reading, but you might hardly read anything at all, but you might listen to radio or audiobooks, watch film and TV, go to the theatre. Perhaps you're a member of an improv troupe. The way we engage with fiction is multi-dimensional. Fictional worlds don't just exist in books. We can see them, we can listen to them, and we can interact with them. And it seems pretty unlikely that the relationship that we've seen in the research between fiction and different social skills is contingent on processes to do with reading words that are written on paper or on a screen, especially because people that have read loads and loads of non-fiction actually often score less highly on those kinds of tests. So if it's the social content of fiction that's important, then it makes sense that fiction through other formats would also relate to social skills. So I'd like to tell you a bit about a study that I ran that looked at that. So looked at the question of whether different ways of engaging with fiction, different fiction formats, related to social skills. So I asked 404 people lots of questions designed to test how empathic they were, how good they were at understanding other people, and also how motivated they were to perform altruistic acts. So that's acts that we perform that are helpful to others with no expectation of reward. And I asked them about which fictional genres they preferred as a general rule, regardless of media. And I also asked them to complete a task of fiction exposure via prose, so written fiction or reading, film and plays. So it was a multi-dimensional measure of fiction exposure. And the way the test works is it encompasses a list of names, so prose author names, film names and play names. And participants are asked to select from the list the names that they know to be fiction authors. And on the list there are real names and there are fake names too. So participants have to select just the ones that they know to be real. So in that way the test controls for indiscriminate responding, so just sort of ticking every box to get it over and done with, or socially desirable responding, which is what might be happening when somebody says that they've read all of Tolstoy and Dickens and all of the classics, but that they perhaps fail to mention their secret stash of things that might be deemed lower brow or more risque. So I'll just tell you a bit about the main results from that study. So the results showed that fiction exposure through prose and film and plays combined positively predicted altruism, people's helpful tendencies. So what that means is that the more fiction people have been exposed to, the more names that they correctly identified, the higher their altruism levels. And the way the statistical model works is that if I could use it to ask any of you about how much fiction you've been exposed to, and then use that to predict how altruistic you're then likely to be. And more specifically, reading and theatre were related to altruism, but film actually wasn't. Film actually wasn't significantly related to altruism in statistical terms. And that might be because when we watch film, we're presented with a range of cues, with lots of visual cues, auditory cues, music. The director does a lot of the legwork for us in terms of whose perspective we should be taking and what that character's inner state is. And so film might incur a more passive engagement style than some of the other media formats. But in terms of preferences for different genres, people that enjoyed comedy above all else showed the highest levels of all of the social skills measured. So across the board, the comedy lovers had the last laugh. And that's perhaps not all that surprising, because actually interpreting comedy is really complex. Because to interpret comedy, we need to understand and be able to integrate facial expressions and voice tone and context, and those things can be incongruous. So perhaps someone is saying one thing, but their voice tone or their facial expression is telling quite a different story. And so also in psychology, we often use comic narratives as a way of testing people's abilities to interpret social scenarios, particularly in groups that usually find that difficult, that find social scenarios confusing and difficult to interpret. And so it makes sense that enjoyment of comedy or experience with comedy might hone those social skills in all of us. And so that brings me towards the moral of this story and heading towards the end. Fiction is multi-dimensional, and although studies have mainly focused on reading, what the research to date seems to show is that the more active forms of engaging with fiction, through reading, through comedy, through theatre, and so perhaps through comedy improv too, tend to relate to social skills, and they might even lead to enhancing people's social skills. And you might be thinking, sure, but wouldn't non-fiction do exactly the same thing? I mean, surely we can learn about social situations by reading non-fiction too. And yes, we can, but the thing about fiction is it allows us to inhabit those experiences firsthand, to simulate those emotional and social experiences of the characters. And we tend to engage more deeply with fiction precisely because it's safe to do so. So fiction isn't explicitly calling us to action, which non-fiction literature might be doing. And the science has shown that even when we control for how much non-fiction a person has read, how much fiction they have read is still uniquely related to their social skills. So to conclude, read more fiction, attend more comedy, more theatre, and perhaps even a few more nights of comedy, theatre, improv is bound to be entertaining, and it might even be good for you. That's it from me.
Take it away, guys. Jenny, I found a stash of pornography under Billy's bed.
A stash of pornography, Jerry.
Yeah, but that's not the worst of it.
Tell me more.
Underneath the razzle, there was some Charles Dickens.
Our son likes Charles Dickens.
And Tolstoy.
And Tolstoy.
I'm so sorry. You'll talk to him, won't you? I'm no good at these sorts of things.
Hey, what you looking at, mate? Oh, look at Dickens. That goatee is amazing. What's the story behind him? Oh, he had the best of times, he had the worst of times. He had a girlfriend called Carol at Christmas. He was a slut.
Hey, you wrote a lot about little boys like that Pip.
Yeah, that's right, Pip.
Come on, Pip, you've got to be ready. We need to go and see the beheading today.
Oh, okay.
Are you? Okay, come on, right, we can do your You look good. Okay, right. Don't embarrass me, son, tonight.
Go on.
Okay, good. Are you looking forward to the
Oh,
beheading?
yes.
It's going to be Aunt Mildred tonight that's beheaded.
What?
Yes.
Mildred?
Yes.
No, not fat Aunt Millie.
Yeah. Oh, who's that? Okay.
It's me, Aunt Millie.
Hello, Millie.
You're gonna die later. Did he say something?
Yes.
You're going to die later. Oh, I am on a diet. You're right.
It's showing. You look fabulous,
She looks
darling.
fat.
Oh, you like my hat? Oh, that's what a lovely young lad. He seems well read.
Pip is a brilliant lad. I'm very proud of him. Aren't you? You're a good, strong lad.
Hi, Pippi. Do you like stories?
Yeah. You can almost hear the ocean in this book, can't you?
What's the book called? Oh my god, 115 different shells. Yes, you can hear the ocean.
It's the way he describes his walk on the beach. You can hear the sand crunching. You can hear the wave crashing. Crash, crash. You hear the seagulls. Whatever they do.
I thought they sang Mambo number 5.
That's only the Caribbean seagulls.
My bad.
The ones in Brighton.
Yeah.
A bit more Chatters and Dave. So yeah, it's like the words, they just go into your head and it's like you're there.
So the words came into my head and they were just there.
Oh my God. Are you Are you hallucinating again?
No, I'm just really well read, so I'm emotional.
Oh. Do you somehow see the world through someone else's eyes?
I see the world through many eyes. It depends on the narrative I'm reading, sir.
Ah.
Yeah.
Whose narrative are you reading now?
Well, there was that one.
Read all about it, read all about it. Daily Mail, Daily Mail,
What is it?
Daily Mail.
Okay. There's not much news in
You
it.
might want some tranquilizers before you read it, mate.
Okay.
I don't know, I only do it 5 minutes a day. It's not very good for me.
So to take a tranquilizer, I'm guessing?
Well, no, I've got a bit of a habit. I can control it though. Fucking.
Wow!
Yes.
I didn't realize that you could see. You are a Daily Mail reader?
I didn't learn much from him.
And you see.
Jerry, come on, I've made your dinner. We need to talk about our son. Okay.
There's not much there. Is that because you want me to do some talking?
I know that we've always struggled talking. It's
Got some more
what
peas?
marriage is. That's what I thought it was. I was in the middle of talking and you want more peas.
Well, because while you're talking, I need to be doing something.
Here we go. Here's the peas, Jerry. So I went into our son's room the other
In the son's room. What's in that one?
No, Juliet, don't do it!
No, she does it.
What?
She does it.
Fuck's sake, dude! No! I can't do this anymore.
I think we should both masturbate now.
Back to the parents.
That seems quite harmless to me. I was into
I
Jack
haven't told
London.
you the worst of it, Jerry. You should have seen the material that they were over.
Go on.
I've never been good with words, Jerry.
Really?
So my mom's never been good with words.
But this is why you started reading.
This is why I started reading.
You read everything. Now you've read everything.
Name it.
The dictionary.
Read it. Yeah. I've read them all. Oxford, Webster's, Scriven,
Scriven's hardcore.
Klingon.
Okay then. Well, you're kind of making you feeling a bit inadequate here then.
I didn't mean to make you feel inadequate, doctor, but they sent me here, and I need to talk to somebody.
Jenny, we need to find who his dealer is. Who's providing him with this filth?
Romeo and Juliet.
Oh no, please.
Charles Dickens.
Oh!
Tolstoy.
Tolstoy. Anna Karenina?
Yes.
Oh!
That one. That one.
Look, we don't get the police involved. His friends must know where he's getting these tomes from.
His friend.
His friend's name. Hey, Kendall. What you got for me, man?
Do you like it?
Yeah, what's that one?
Oh, that one's a bestseller.
How did you know which one I pointed at?
Oh, I know everything.
You're not even looking
I
at it.
can look with other parts.
What's it about?
It's about a boy following his dreams.
Really?
And he becomes a
A wizard, you say?
wizard. Yes.
Does he have some sort of feature about him so that he can
He's
find it
horribly
better?
disfigured. In his face.
I can see it. I can see it, and I'm feeling things.
And he's partially sighted.
He's partially. So, one eye? Oh, he has a dog!
And he has a dog.
But what's the major conflict? I mean, he's got to get past the whole visual issues.
Yes, he needs to see. And he's using his seeing guide dog to guide him through his wizarding ways as he journeys to become an adult wizard.
And then what happens? He hits a
A brick wall.
A brick wall.
It's a brick wall.
Does this arouse him in any way? Damn it!
The arousal section is in the XXX area.
Oh, can I find that back here?
Now, that's a restricted library. Now, turn left.
Yeah.
And right.
Up.
Up. Top. Top. And pull.
Ah, I got it.
Yeah, pull.
Oh, the Bible.
Got the pamphlets.
What you after?
Any marks?
Any? Look, mate. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm dyslexic. But have this one.
What's George Orwell?
Yeah. Animal Farm. It's cracking, that book is.
Bloody hell, there's pictures and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, no, the pictures
2
don't do
breasts
it for me.
bad, 4 breasts good.
Thank God you're here, Jennifer.
Amber, I came as soon as I heard.
I know, I'm out of books.
Oh my God.
I know, it's a travesty.
Do you think we're ready to watch a film now?
Oh no, I can't do a film.
I know it's
No,
morally bankrupt.
No, it's got too many stimulating visuals and so many things coming at you at the same time.
And explosions.
Well, depending on the film, yes. Sometimes not much happens for the whole thing.
Yeah. Dorian Gray?
What do you mean? Have you already watched one?
Well,
You watched Dorian Gray?
I have.
What? Is it the same as the book?
Well, the mirror was kind of a bit odd, but yeah.
Oh, what odd? Is it not the same mirror I've got in my head? Is it different?
Do you have a mirror in your head?
No, obviously. No, I don't have an actual mirror. I've obviously imagined a mirror in my head.
This shit you sold me, it's been cut.
I'm sorry, Dad, but
This Dorian Gray, it's been cut with Alice through the looking glass. I mean, there's stories all over the bloody place. I want it pure. I want it pure.
we all know Carroll was a lot more prolific. We got to give him some work.
But I want the pure stuff. I don't want none of this street junk you get from that Kindle mate of yours. I want what a real bibliophile gets.
Dad, I don't think you can handle
I
that.
want Waterstones.
I've been keeping this hidden real deep down because I especially didn't want Mom to find out. You know how she gets. Remember that time when she found out that I made friends with the Jewish boy across the street?
Flashback.
He's my friend.
Hi. In this scene, he's me and I'm
Oh,
him. Anyways, if you don't remember, it just didn't go well.
Yeah, my memory is it was a bit bland
Anyways,
actually. I I think I must have seen the film, not read the book.
If Mom finds out what I'm about to give you, she's gonna overreact hard.
Come on, show me, son.
Okay. It was under my mattress. No one checks there.
Shut up, Holmes.
Yeah, look inside.
Boys, your dinner's ready.
Ah, Dad! Yes, Mom. Mom.
What are you doing in my house again?
Oh, what's for dinner? Smells yummy.
What are you doing
Jennifer,
in my house?
I was-
Jerry, what are you doing with my son?
Explain, Mom, Dad.
Are you trying to be his friend? Is that what you're trying to do, Jerry?
No, I was interrogating him.
You know we don't do friends,
No,
Jerry.
he's no friend of mine.
I'm very scared of him.
Ever since you had that boy, you had that friend, that...
Huge boy.
I'm sorry, sir. It won't happen again.
No. It won't.
Yeah, but Ron told me there'll be fine
Ron
to do.
did not know what
Hermione.
No.
No, sir.
Open the book. Turn to page 194. Read. Keep turning. Faster. My grandmother turns faster. Okay.
You don't have to do it anymore. Here.
Stop. Don't throw it in his face. No, I must stop you. No, no. Oh no, my hands are tied. If you want him to be free, he's got to go in his mouth.
Well, that was weird. There we go.
Have you read this telegram? People still send them, you know.
Wow.
There are very few emotive words. I don't think the sender had that much money.
No, but it has a lot of emojis in it.
I know, but it's... How do you interpret this? It's not words, it's pictures, and it's...
Smiley face, frowny face, happy eyes, table flip.
That means he's drunk?
I sense a game of Monopoly somehow in this.
Really? How do you interpret that?
The table flip.
Okay.
So, okay, Tony's in trouble. Tony is in trouble.
Is he mortgaged all these properties or something?
Obviously.
Okay, but why send a telegram? I mean, just a homing owl would be better.
Yeah, you know, Hogwarts does have a good games club, I think, and, you know, we want to find a way to make him cheat.
Well, I thought that was the point. Maybe he's in trouble. He's been discovered cheating.
We have to help him.
Morning.
Morning. So, I called this meeting for a reason.
Yeah.
Books are getting boring. They're getting boring.
Yeah.
You're in charge of figurative language, yeah?
Yeah,
Why isn't shit more figurative?
well...
I was expecting a metaphor. Pipe down.
Yes.
You're in charge of onomatopoeia. Do something for me.
Bang!
Yeah, thank you. You know what? You're in charge.
Hey!
Booyah! Guys, there's gotta be a way we make these literatures more exciting.
How about we get writers in?
Nah.
How about we use a video camera to film them?
Ah.
How about we put interpreted dance with every book?
Didn't I fire you already?
Fine, for onomatopoeia, but not for interpreted dance.
All right, we'll hold on to you. What are you holding on to?
How about we turn the whole thing into an industry?
Yeah,
An industry, you say?
Yeah.
I like that.
An industry, so like a money-making collective.
Like,
Yeah.
just get some money in.
So instead of
Words.
Oh, there's money.
oh,
I'll open the door for
let
him.
him in.
Guys, have you just heard of the new invention?
The industry.
Oh, whoa, 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 whoa! Are you talking about that Gutenberg son of a bitch again?
Oh no, I'm talking about Hollywood.
Hollywood? Hollywood?
Yeah.
Word.
I know.
Hollywood.
just popped up. Down the street. You know, they're looking for some people to like write stuff.
Ah, fuck you guys!
Bang! Bang! Bang!
Hi, I'm Steve Gutenberg. You may know me from such films as 3 Men and a Baby and The Cop Thing.
Hi, I am Jonas Gutenberg, or something like that, and I invented the printing press.
I am the person that operates the printing press.
Yeah,
I'm the
she
printing
works
press.
for me. Yeah, he is an inanimate object.
So, do we have a script? Yes.
I'm Pete.
So what are we doing? Steve, I remember you from such films as 3 Men and a Baby,
Yes, indeed.
and Diner.
And the police thing.
The Police Academy movies.
That's
are
the
my
one.
favorite.
Yes, they were. They pay the bills.
Right, I don't see the altruism in these films, however.
Well, that's because I haven't had a decent script in years.
Interesting. So, if I can printing press, because that's a verb, a script for you that you think you can work with, you might be a Hollywood star again.
I think the stuff I've been getting is like they're just making 100 monkeys type shit and making me read it.
Let's
Cut
see
to
that
the
one.
100 monkeys.
To be or not to be?
Cut. Two.
Let me take this one for example.
Yeah.
To be or not to be, mine's a banana. Ooh!
That one never made sense to me, and they made us read it in school in 11th grade, and I didn't
You
get
mean
it.
this is a text for schools?
It's a school text. Now, if you flip the page, yeah, he fucks the ghost of the banana.
Colin, Jennifer and I have been talking about your recent article you've given to the schools.
Yes.
We don't think it's highly appropriate for kids to, and I quote, fuck a banana ghost.
Sorry I'm late, I'm Billy Banana Ghost.
Oh, I see where you get inspiration from.
Yes. Sorry, don't read this at all. It's not like I was spying on you. It's fine.
Okay, see you later. Weird meeting.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not appropriate, is it?
No, I mean there is
It was
one
based
thing.
on truth.
Well, you know, there's also the truth about murdering 5 midgets, but we don't put that in schools, do we?
No.
Well, you just have to expose
And what about
them.
this? When he shot an armadillo
Okay,
with
that
another armadillo.
was a bit of an exaggeration.
There's armadillos hitting armadillos. How is that even physically possible?
See,
So these school texts,
Aye, right, yeah.
the metaphors are just surreal.
Aye.
I mean, how would the cycle of man from birth to death be represented by 5 midgets being slaughtered?
Aye, right, well, what I was thinking it might be,
That,
you start off with 5 midgets, and then one bangs their head, and you're left with 4. It's like bottles on the wall. You know, I have 5 midgets on the wall. One tumbles over. How many have you got
Go on,
left?
Dad,
go on.
That's the custodian. He's not my English teacher.
But I need some understanding of why you're being asked to read this nonsense.
That is classic literature.
What I'm saying is he's not going to have the answers for us. I feel the same way as you. but he's been known to spit on the children's backpacks. And
Hello. Sorry, I'm Jennifer.
How do you do, Jennifer?
This is Miss Rogier.
Miss Rogier.
Use my first name. I'm the English teacher.
Hi, Mrs. Rogier.
Hey.
We have had lots of talks about all of this literary material going around.
She's so good, Dad. Why is he still here?
That's on me.
I told you you would, Dad.
Pip here is, I have to say, he's an excellent student. I mean, excellent.
Young Pip.
He's really got involved. We do have one issue that I am worried about. He's constantly aroused.
It's true. I find her classes very arousing, Dad.
Well, it's the text you're giving him.
No, I know, but
They're very evocative.
I'm constantly stimulated.
Say, he is constantly.
God, this is so boring. It's like monkeys wrote it. Yes, I know, absolutely. Okay, monkeys aren't bad, usually. But does it have to be about bananas every time? You have a point. Why am I going ook? I'm reading too much of this stuff. It's like I'm becoming a monkey. This monkey text is making me like a monkey. I can't.
Oh, Jesus.
Thank you.
I was so proud of you at the school.
Thanks, you had a lot of good things to say about me,
Your
Dad.
imagination, I mean, the fact that you can get constant arousal from those texts just shows how brilliant that mind is.
And you and Mom told me not to look at porn.
But that's pointless, It's just pictures.
Right, I made you dinner. Here we go. Extra peas.
Actually, tonight, Jennifer,
Thanks, Mom.
I don't want peas. Pip and we're having some bonding time.
Yeah, we don't want peas, Mom.
You have the peas.
Yeah.
So-
What do we want, Dad?
Well, I think just a light meal, a light snack, and a fireside chat. Book review.
Okay.
Why don't you review the Shelley you read, Mary Shelley, the Frankenstein book that got you so aroused?
Yeah. Well, I thought it was going to be all about monsters. It turned out it was just about this one scientist guy. And then there was all the description of pastoral hills and shit.
Stop there. It's before the watershed.
Hey, you've been bad mouthing me. To your family.
No, I haven't. What's your name again?
John. McBride.
Oh, my friend, John McBride.
Hey.
No,
No.
I haven't been
no.
bad-mouthing you.
What? Just so.
Mr. McBride, what do you want from me?
I want you to recreate your review of Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. I want you to do it for me with this pitchfork.
Well, what's in
And I
it?
want you to enjoy performing. I want you to be an actor.
What's in it for you, Mr. McBride?
I'm gonna train you.
Why?
Why?
Why would you want to do that?
Because
I'm just a kid with a boner.
We don't use that term here.
Your action.
Thank you. Right. Recite to me Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Chapter 1,
I don't
page
want
19.
There was a monster
With
once.
the pitchfork.
I have to point at the words.
No, you use the pitchfork like with meaning. Like Mary Shelley.
I think you should just do it. Can I call my dad?
No.
Dad! Mom!
Who's this?
So, he's still there. I thought it was a dream, but he's still there. There's a man.
Hello.
The man.
Hello.
What are you doing to my son?
I was trying to make him an actor.
I don't understand what he's doing at all. He gave me a pitchfork.
I'm here for you now, son.
Thanks. Can we get rid of him?
I'll just take this.
So, what have we learned so far? Monkeys can't write fuck all.
Books are dangerous.
Books are dangerous.
Textbooks are doubly so.
Doubly so, yeah.
And
Don't eat peas or eat peas.
either or, but
Either or, okay, I'm not sure about that one.
yeah.
Alex can't do Scottish accents.
Do either accents?
Which one?
South African.
Wasn't Mary Shelley South African? I think she was. Let's do that. Mary Shelley.
Okay, so Frankenstein. What happened is Frankenstein was created by Dr. Frankenstein.
Hello, I'm Dr. Frank Eastine.
Frankenstein. Okay, so what you do is you create a monster. You create life. Go. Oh, you would think that would take so many pages. And then villagers revolt against monster. The villagers revolt with their pitchforks. And Frankenstein, maybe he jumps off cliff. No, the monsters doesn't, but Frankenstein does. Yes, it's his monster. It's a misconception.
Sorry.
My
bad.
We love the monster.
Dad? Never mind.
Bye! You know what? You're right, Mr. McBride.
Hey.
That novel moved me.
I did.
That monster's actions were actually benevolent.
Hey.
And he was not actually trying to hurt anyone.
No.
They couldn't see that.
No.
They just saw what they wanted to see.
Hey.
Pip, what's going on here?
Nothing, Dad!
Where's your erection?